Stop. Stop.
I'm sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but
Just stop.
you life in prison.
I made my ruling.
I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to portray me as.
It was so very hard for me to tell a 5-year-old his dad would never come home.
I don't regret the The only thing that regret is that he was killed too. I wish I killed more of those motherfuckers.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point. You took it upon yourself to end my son's life. You changed our lives forever.
This is Jonaki Martinez Estrella, who was facing murder charges in New York City. On the night of June 20th, 2018, Estrella, along with Manuel Rivera, Elvin Garcia, Jose Munez, and Antonio Santiago, brutally stabbed and killed 15-year-old Lisandro Guzman Feliz. All five were part of a vicious Dominican gang called the Trinitarios. According to reports, Lisandro had gone to meet a new friend a few blocks away from his apartment in the Bronx when 4 cars pulled up. For a rival gang member, the cars started chasing Lisandro, eventually cornering him to a nearby bodega. CCTV footage from inside the shop shows a desperate Lisandro seeking refuge and trying to hide behind a counter. But he was spotted by one of the gang members. A scuffle ensued and Lisandro was dragged out of the bodega. What happened next shocked the entire city of New York. Armed with large knives and machetes, the 5 took turns brutally stabbing the teenager. Then fled away in getaway cars. After the attack, a severely injured Lisandro managed to enter the shop but was sent away. Outside and fading fast, he gestured towards onlookers to call 911. Then he started running towards St. Barnabas Hospital, which was just 1 block away, before collapsing at the entrance. Passers-by desperately tried to save Lisandro. However, 2 police officers just stood by watching the scene. They were later investigated for failing to help. Just 20 minutes later, Lisandro passed away as a result of a fatal stab wound to his neck. Police soon got hold of the CCTV footage and arrested the 5 suspects, charging them with first-degree murder.
Police have arrested the 5 suspects accused in the murder of this teenager in the Bronx.
At their trial, a 6th member of the Trinitarios gang, Kevin Alvarez, testified against the 5 murderers.
Kevin Alvarez's arrest, he's testifying in court against 5 of his fellow alleged Trinitarios gang members.
Alvarez, who had helped drag Lisandro out of the bodega, identified the suspects in exchange for lesser time served for conspiracy charges. Eventually, the jury convicted the 5 gang members for the brutal murder of Lisandro Guzman Feliz. At their sentencing, the killers showed no signs of remorse. Instead, they waved gang signs and shouted gang slogans. Jonaki Estrella, who delivered the fatal blow, was sentenced to life without parole. Jose Munez, Elvin Garcia, and Antonio Santiago each received 25 years to life, while Manuel Rivera was sentenced to 23 years to life in prison. Lisandro Guzman Feliz lost his life for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what happens when a popular With guns and faces covered with a mask, Boatwright and Newsom stepped out of the SUV and robbed Onfroy at gunpoint. A scuffle ensued, and the two ended up fatally shooting the rapper before grabbing his bag of cash and fleeing. A passerby filmed the immediate aftermath of the attack and called 911. Another captured Onfroy's lifeless body in the driver's seat of his BMW. The tragic incident left the hip-hop industry in shock, with popular artists like Diplo and J. Cole paying tribute to the teenage sensation. Shortly afterwards, the four were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery.
You are charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree.
However, Robert Allen took a plea deal in exchange for his testimony in the trial of the other three, which began with the prosecution claiming that Onfroy's murder was pre-planned and efficient.
3561. So ask yourselves, that's more than enough time to formulate the premeditated intent and the design to kill someone and the killing.
Boatwright's lawyer suggested that Robert Allen, who was yet to testify against the three, would lie in court.
Robert Allen is the only person that you will hear from that puts Michael Boatwright at Riva Motorsports on June 18th, 2018. Well, let me be very clear. If Robert Allen testifies in this case, he will lie.
Then, Williams' lawyer incredibly threw accusations at popular hip-hop artist Drake, arguing that the Grammy Award-winning rapper was to be blamed for Onfroy's death.
Before X died, he said, if anybody kills me, it's Drake. And do you think that for one moment, here today, days after the event, he's killed by 2 masked men, right? He came out on social media and said, guys, before he dies, if anybody kills me, it's Drake. Do you think in that time span that they went and they addressed him, they talked to him? No. Do you think sitting here today, years later, any detective has ever asked, Drake or anybody like that? No.
He also accused Robert Allen of getting paid by Drake.
How much money in 2018 did you receive from either Drake or one of Drake's associates?
I never met him before.
You never met Drake?
No.
Do you know who he is, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Finally, Newsom's lawyer appeared last, stating that no physical evidence linked his client to the crime.
The evidence will not show that any firearm was ever recovered that could be matched or linked to Trayvon Newsom. The evidence will show no DNA whatsoever found on the body of Mr. Onfroy or on that car.
However, he was wrong. The prosecution presented a boatload of evidence in court, including CCTV footage from the crime scene. But it was 3 pieces of damning evidence that settled the case. First was the testimony of Onfroy's step-uncle Leonard Kerr, who fled the scene of the shooting. He described what actually happened that day.
Taller guy, as I tell you, the taller guy went round to Jassie's side. The shorter one now come around to the door that my door that I opened, and he go inside the car. And then I heard something like, hey! How much time I don't know, but I heard something like explode.
Kerr also reenacted the moment Onfroy was shot.
You don't come out the effing car. And he was like with a gun. You don't come out the effing car. The shorter one was at Jassie's side.
The second crucial piece of evidence was pictures and videos captured the day of the shooting, showing the defendants posing and dancing with stolen money.
It shows Williams fanning $100 bills and surrounded by money. And this video taken at 12:35 a.m. This time Williams appears to be in a car, also fanning $100 bills, smiling and singing.
And finally, the testimony of Robert Allen ultimately sealed the deal.
I see you grabbing the bag, shots are fired.
Who shoots the shots that are fired?
Michael Boatwright.
And who does he shoot?
Triple X.
Where does he shoot him from? What side of the car?
Driver.
Allen claimed that Newsom grabbed the bag of money, Boatwright shot Onfroy, and Williams was the getaway driver as he sat in the car. Unsurprisingly, the trio were convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael Boatwright received an additional life sentence plus 30 years, as he was the one who pulled the trigger on Onfroy. As for Robert Allen, his plea deal meant a reduced sentence of 7 years in prison plus 20 years probation for second-degree murder, while XXXTentacion's promising life was cut short for a few $1,000s. But what happens when an attempted robbery goes horribly wrong? Like in the case of Michael Thomas, who's facing homicide charges in Wisconsin. Reports suggest that in 2011, 16-year-old Thomas was driving around in a stolen minivan with Malik Merchant and Jimmy Scales when they stopped at West Lisbon Avenue and attempted to rob Sharon Staples. Thomas allegedly jumped out of the car and threatened Sharon to give up her purse, but when the 34-year-old resisted, Thomas fatally shot her. Sharon was 12 weeks pregnant at the time. Thomas was arrested, where he pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree reckless homicide for killing Sharon and her unborn child. At his sentencing, Thomas was initially calm and silent, then suddenly, all hell broke loose. As he was about to leave the courtroom, Thomas looked towards his family and made an attempt to move towards them. This prompted court deputies to tackle him to the ground, causing an outburst among those sitting in the gallery. The deputies managed to stand him up on his feet, but they couldn't control the teenager. At last, Thomas was restrained and escorted out of the courtroom. A sheriff took hold of the situation and calmed the irate family members down.
No good is going to be done by this courtroom being disrupted. Okay? What's going to happen is we are going to allow the other people that were in this courtroom to leave. Okay?
Eventually, the crowd started leaving. A deputy asked a guy named Chuck to wait, but Chuck was having none of it.
Just wait, okay? We're going to let everybody go.
Mama right there. Come on, man. Every time I fuck a little brother, leave me the fuck alone.
He was promptly cuffed and taken into custody. Ultimately, Michael Thomas was sentenced to 35 years in prison. As for Malik Merchant, who police said acted as a lookout, he was sentenced to 17 years in prison. The getaway driver Jimmy Scales, who claimed to be a member of the street gang Disciples, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. While Michael Thomas showed great physical strength and defiance in court, what happens when a gang member bursts into tears? Like in the case of Brandon Spencer, who's facing attempted murder charges in California. Police said that in 2012, 19-year-old Spencer was involved in a shootout at a Halloween party on the University of Southern California campus.
He was convicted of shooting a rival gang member at a 2012 Halloween party on the USC campus.
4 people were wounded in the incident. Some students fled the scene, while others hid. Reportedly, Spencer also ran with them, but was eventually captured by the LAPD. He was charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. During his trial, the prosecution argued that Spencer, a known gang member, fired into the crowd in retaliation against a rival gang member.
that if you are so intent on killing someone that you're willing to shoot them and at the same time open fire into a crowd.
However, Spencer maintained his innocence throughout the trial.
Sorry for what happened, Your Honor, but I came to life in prison. And I'm not a bad person, but I made mistakes. But I'm not just some gangbanger that she tried to betray me as.
But the jury was having none of it. They found Spencer guilty of all charges. Then, at his sentencing, as the judge read out his fate, Spencer completely lost it.
The minimum period of parole eligibility is 15 years plus 25 years to life in accordance with Penal Code Section 12022.53D. This is to be...
He broke down and banged the table twice with his head before being held back by officers. Ultimately, Spencer was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison for the USC shootings. While Brandon Spencer had a total meltdown in court, how does it compare to a case that terrorized the whole country? Like in the case of David Parga, who's on trial for murdering a student in California. In 2006, 27-year-old Leland Washington, an African-American, was reportedly asked to leave a Halloween party where most of the guests were Mexican gang members. Police said Washington came back to the party, which Pargas, a La Habra Street gang member, felt was a sign of disrespect. The gangster then walked up to the college graduate and, without provocation, shot him several times in the torso. Washington was rushed to UCI Medical Center, where he died soon after. Parga was arrested and charged with felony murder. He decided to represent himself in court and was eventually found guilty of second-degree murder. During sentencing, family members of Washington addressed their loved one's killer. His brother said Washington did not deserve to go this way.
There's days that the grief is so much that I just kind of muddle through the day. You have to understand who he was. He was such a great person, and the way that he died, he did not deserve that at all.
While their sister spoke about the emptiness left behind by her brother's death.
Halloween weekend will never be the same for us. My brother was murdered that weekend, and it's ironic that we're here today for the sentencing for the person that murdered Leland Cleophas Washington.
And finally, their mother said if given a chance, Washington would have been a great friend to his killer.
And I think if Mr. Parga had ever known him, he couldn't have been anything but a friend to him. He couldn't have found any other way but to make him a friend.
Parga was also given a chance to speak, where he displayed remorse for his actions and apologized to the victim's family.
I know there's nothing I could do to bring this guy's brother back, but I am deeply sorry for what happened to him. To you specifically, I want to say sorry to what happened to your son. I know the pain you're feeling. My mom comes to see me, she cries because what's happening to me, and I could only imagine what you're going through. You lost your son.
However, the judge called Parga a coward for shooting the victim for no apparent reason and ultimately sentenced him to 50 years to life in prison for the murder of Leland Washington. While David Parga was a small-time gang member at the bottom of the food chain, what happens when the leader of a biker gang gets caught? Like in the case of Joseph Lancia, who's facing attempted murder charges in Rhode Island. 30-year-old Lancia was the president of the Hells Angels biker gang in Rhode Island when he fired a gun at a truck that was driven by Richard Starnino. Starnino, once considered a prospect for joining the Hells Angels, was engaged in an ongoing dispute with Lancia. Authorities said no one was injured in the incident, but the situation could have been far worse.
The bullet struck the passenger side of the vehicle. No one was injured. It should be noted that there were children in the area at that time, and there is a school across the street from the location of this shooting.
Astonishingly, Starnino not only survived, but he kept on driving and finished his deliveries. After the incident, a massive raid was conducted at the Hells Angels headquarters.
Anyone inside 161 Messer Street? This is the state police. Come out with your hands up. Do it now.
Some gang members were arrested and taken into custody. Lancia, too, was arrested. However, as part of a plea agreement, the more severe charges of attempted murder were dropped. Instead, Lancia pleaded no contest to felony assault and battery.
30-year-old Joseph Lancia changed his plea from not guilty to no contest.
At his sentencing, several members of Hell's Angels came in full support for their president. Lancia was given a chance to speak, which he refused.
Is there anything that you would like to say, sir?
Nothing.
However, Judge Kirsten Rogers had some words for Lancia.
Should you not appear in a timely manner, and I'm talking 5 minutes late, or if there are any violations of your release.
She also ordered him to stay away from the victim.
There is a no contact order for the protection of Richard Starnino for the duration of 8 years.
Eventually, it was time for Lancia to learn his fate.
A 5-year full sentence, all of which is to be served at the ACI.
Lancia was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison plus 10 years of probation. While Joseph Lancia's victim lived to tell his tale, what happens when drug dealers go after one of their own? Like in the case of 33-year-old Christopher Dean, a drug dealer in Atlanta who wanted to leave the criminal world behind. Looking to make one last drug deal before turning clean, Dean set up a deal with Xavier Gibson, who was a member of the street gang Gangster Disciples. The gang had learned that Dean previously worked as a police informant and lured him to meet at Gibson's house in Sandy Creek Drive. Then, for more than an hour, they viciously beat Dan with a crowbar and a 2x4 before sodomizing him, torturing him, and ultimately executing him. The gangsters then disposed of Dean's body at the Hamilton E. Holmes MARTA station.
Police have just discovered a man's body in the trunk of a car.
Police found the body dumped in the back of a car, along with the torture weapons. But it was back at Gibson's house where they made a shocking discovery. Police found evidence that the suspects continued living at the house, with Dean's bloodstains everywhere. 5 members of Gangster Disciples were arrested for Dean's murder: Christopher Lockett, Xavier Gibson, Cortez Clark, Joshua Rooks, and Jasper Green. Such was the extent of the torture that prosecutors said Dean's skull was actually depressed.
They beat him to the point that his skull was actually depressed.
They also said the suspects were trying to send a message to other gang members.
They were obviously attempting to send a message to fellow gang members and anyone who might dare to testify against them.
All 5 were found guilty of murder and other gang-related charges. At their sentencing, an emotional father of the victim took the stand.
We all have empty space in our hearts for Chris. It was so very hard for me to tell a 5-year-old his daddy would never come home.
Ultimately, the 5 gang members were sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Christopher Dean. While Christopher Dean's killers showed no remorse, the suspect in our next case made the whole courtroom emotional. This is Tariq Jackson, who's on trial for murder in Michigan. Jackson was 16 when he allegedly pulled out a gun and opened fire after a fight broke out between 2 Ypsilanti gangs in 2015. The bullet hit 20-year-old Keandre Duff in the head, instantly killing him. Jackson, now 18, was facing multiple charges, including open murder. He was set to go to trial, but eventually pled guilty to second-degree murder. Things got emotional at his sentencing when the victim's mother directly addressed Jackson.
Our whole world was turned upside down from that point.
She said his actions had changed her life forever.
You changed our lives forever. You took it upon yourself to end my son's life.
But shockingly, she forgave her son's killer and showed sympathy towards him, addressing him as a young man who had dreams.
Well, he forgives you. And I forgive you. I don't hate you. And then they sent me a picture of Mr. Jackson, and when I looked at him, I said, Lord Jesus, this is somebody's baby. This is a man who had, a young man who had dreams to be more than what he became. And if anything, Father God, in the name of Jesus.
She then asked for Jackson's mother and had some words of comfort for her.
Is Tyrik's mother in here? Mom, come here. Your son is still going to be a great man. All he has to do is give it to the Lord.
Then, in a heartfelt moment, the two mothers shared a hug in the courtroom. Jackson was also given a chance to address the court, where he apologized to the victim's family.
First off, I just want to say sorry to the family of the victim. I wish the situation would have played out like that. I never thought that my choices and decisions would have affected so many people. No mother deserves to bury her son, and no mother deserves to see her son change.
He said he got involved in gang activities when he was young and took full responsibility for his crimes.
I was 16 at the time of the incident. I was young, angry, full of pride, caught in the streets and in the middle of gangs and all type of other stuff. And I felt like, that was the best choice for me to make. But today I don't think that was the best choice. But I take the full responsibility for my actions and I'm ready to face the consequences.
He also warned other gang members to learn from his mistakes and change their ways.
The life that we was living, being in gangs and all that other stuff, it ain't worth 16 years or death, because eventually you be put in a situation and there's severe consequences that come with that.
Then, he ended his statement with some words of encouragement for his family.
My family, I just want to say, don't cry, this isn't a funeral. My life is far from over. They can lock my body, but they can't lock my mind. It's going to be a long tunnel I have to walk through, but I always stay focused at the light at the end.
Ultimately, Jackson was sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison for the murder of Keandre Duff. While Tariq Jackson's youthful exuberance took the life of a youngster, what happens when someone attacks a police officer out of desperation? Like in the case of Officer Bronson Kalaloa, a 10-year veteran who was killed during a traffic stop in Hawaii. In 2018, Officer Kalaloa approached a vehicle driven by Justin Waike, a wanted fugitive who was out on bail. Waike had an outstanding warrant against him for violating bail terms. He also had 16 prior convictions, including drug and firearm offenses. During the stop, as soon as the officer approached him, Waike opened fire, hitting Officer Kalaloa in the neck and leg. The 46-year-old later died in the hospital. Waike escaped and went on the run, and a large manhunt ensued on the island of Hawaii. 3 days later, an SUV was stopped at a checkpoint in South Point. Police said Officer Brian Tina opened the rear hatch of the vehicle, and Waike, who was hiding underneath a blanket, emerged and opened fire, wounding the officer.
Justin Waike was in the very back and had shot him. He had concealed himself underneath the blanket, so the officer did not see him.
Other police officers returned fire, and Waike was killed in the shootout.
There was an exchange of fire there, and Waike, as a result of the exchange of fire, Waike was killed.
Waike had 3 accomplices present in the car who were helping him escape: Jorge Pagan Torres, Malia Lahala, and Crystal Ferreira.
Torres, Lahala, and Ferreira remain in custody, and today in court, the judge denied them bail.
They were arrested and charged with accomplice to attempted murder. However, the prosecution couldn't prove those charges, and the 3 were later convicted of lesser misdemeanor assault offenses. Ultimately, Lahala was sentenced to 6 years in prison, while Pagan, Torres, and Ferreira each received a year of imprisonment. While Officer Bronson Kalaloa lost his life in the line of duty, what happens when a helpless elderly woman is killed? Like in the case of David Moses, who's on trial for murder in California. Moses was 17 when he and 2 others reportedly entered the home of Dorothy Session with the intention of robbing the 81-year-old. When Dorothy resisted, Moses mercilessly beat the old woman to death.
Moses admitted to investigators in an interview that he struck the woman.
Police found Dorothy's body with multiple injuries, including a broken nose, missing teeth, cuts to her mouth, and black eyes. Moses was arrested and 2 years later convicted of first-degree murder. At his sentencing, Moses showed no remorse for his actions. He laughed and yawned throughout the proceeding, finding the whole situation boring.
With a chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
At one point, he even dozed off in his chair. Prosecutors said Moses seemed to enjoy the trial.
It gave me the impression that he thought this was a game. There was just no expression of remorse whatsoever for his actions.
While Moses was facing a lengthy time in prison, his attorney asked the judge for hope in the form of a possibility of parole.
To give him that hope for the next 25 years, that he may have an opportunity to be returned to society.
But the judge was having none of it, and ultimately sentenced Moses to life in prison without parole.
The judge sentenced Moses to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Mr. Moses received the punishment he deserved. Frankly put, he's just a dangerous individual, and there's only one place to put him, and that's in the penitentiary for the rest of his life.
Since Moses was sentenced as a juvenile, a change in law meant he became eligible to be resentenced as an adult. Even though there was a chance of changing his sentence from life in prison to 25 years to life in prison, the judge emphasized Moses's complete lack of rehabilitation since his conviction. Coupled that with the brutality of the attack on Dorothy Session, the judge resentenced Moses to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While David Moses was twice sentenced to life for killing a helpless old lady, what happens when a killer vows to kill more in the courtroom? Like in the case of Luis Bracamontes, who's on trial for killing 2 police officers in California. As per reports, on October 24, 2014, Bracamontes went on a violent crime spree that resulted in the deaths of 2 sheriff's deputies in Northern California. It all started in the parking lot of a Motel 6 when Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver was fatally shot in the head as he was examining Bracamontes' vehicle. Bracamontes then stole a car and fled to Pacer County, where he shot 2 law enforcement officials, killing Detective Michael Davis Jr.
Bracamontes, an undocumented immigrant, is accused of murdering Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver and then Placer County Sheriff's Detective Mike Davis Jr. during a crime spree that also included carjacking and other shooting victims in October of 2014.
An extensive manhunt followed, and eventually, Bracamontes was taken into custody. Even though Bracamontes pleaded not guilty, his courtroom actions suggested otherwise.
Ladies and gentlemen, please step out of the hallway.
Bracamontes showed no remorse and wished he killed more, promising to do so once he broke out of prison.
You don't want to allow me to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, please step out of the hallway. I don't regret that. The only thing that I regret is that I was killed too. I wish I killed more of those motherfuckers. I will break up soon and I will kill more.
However, what he did next shocked everyone in the courtroom.
There was no need to prove all the. Be silent. Be silent.
Bracamontes gladly admitted to killing the 2 police officers. Even his own attorney didn't try to hide the fact.
Mr. Bracamontes is responsible for the deaths of both Deputy Danny Oliver and Detective Mike Davis.
Unsurprisingly, Bracamontes was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Did unlawfully and with malice aforethought commit murder in the first degree.
His reaction? A wry smile and an audible cheer.
We find the defendant guilty.
Bracamontes' behavior got even more unsettling as he blew kisses, smiled, and clapped towards the victim's family members sitting in the gallery. Then, in one final act of defiance, Bracamontes made a chilling threat while leaving the courtroom. While Luis Bracamontes